All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to tackle a story you think you know, the founding of Jamestown, and pretty much turn it completely on its head. We're going to see how America's first permanent English colony actually survived, not because of some amazing English grit, but because of an indigenous empire's really sophisticated grand strategy.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. We all have this picture in our heads of the Jamestown colony, right? From school, maybe from movies, but honestly, when you look at the actual facts, its survival is, well, it's pretty much a miracle. This whole mission was constantly on the brink of total collapse.
And I'm not just saying that. I mean, the incredibly influential historian Edmund Morgan, he dedicated an entire chapter of his work to what he flat out called the Jamestown fiasco. And he wasn't the only one. Tons of historians have shown that the settlement was a near-total failure. So the question is, what exactly were they up against?
I mean, look at this list. It's like a recipe for absolute disaster. Thanks to modern tree ring analysis, we now know they landed smack in the middle of the region's worst drought in 8 centuries. And the colonists themselves? They were mostly gentlemen adventurers looking to strike it rich, not farmers who knew how to survive. They were starving, they were sick, they were constantly fighting with each other, and they were completely surrounded.
So that leads us to the big, central mystery of this whole story. You have this colony, it's weak, it's desperate, completely vulnerable. The indigenous empire that controlled the entire region could have snuffed them out in a heartbeat. So, why didn't they? The answer to that question changes everything.
To get to the bottom of this, we've got to totally flip our perspective. We need to stop looking at that tiny failing English fort and start focusing on who was really running the show in the Chesapeake region, the Powhatan Paramount Chiefdom, in a land they called Tsenacommacah.
And the power imbalance here, it's just staggering. Just think about it. On one side, you have maybe 100 disorganized, starving colonists. On the other side, you've got Tsenacommacah, a sophisticated, expanding empire of over 15,000 people, controlling more than 200 villages, all under the firm rule of one powerful leader.
And the man in charge of all this was Wahunsenacawh, though the English just called him Powhatan. Now, this guy was in his 60s. He was an experienced, really shrewd empire builder who'd already brought 35 tribes under his control. The English weren't his first rodeo. He was already dealing with constant threats from rivals, like the Massachusetts up north. For him, these newcomers were just the latest piece on a very, very complex political chessboard.
So you're a powerful leader, like Wahunsenacawh. How do you respond to these new arrivals? Well, not with random acts of violence or kindness. Oh no. He had a very clear 3-part strategy for dealing with them right from the get-go. See, his grand plan wasn't to wipe them out. Not at all. It was to incorporate them. He wanted to keep the English weak, keep them stuck in Jamestown, control all their trade, and then ultimately use them as a kind of subordinate group, a weird new tribe that he could use against his own indigenous enemies.
Now, the secret ingredient to this whole strategy? It all comes down to something anthropologists call prestige goods. To Wahunsenacawh, English copper, that was worth more than gold. It was this rare, spiritually powerful material, and controlling who got it was the key to political power in his empire. Those English ships were basically a new floating copper mine.
So when you think about it, yeah, he could have wiped the colonists out, easily. But that would have been a terrible business decision. Why would you destroy the only source of this incredibly valuable copper? Keeping them alive, but dependent and close by, well, that was a much smarter political and economic move. So Wahunsenacawh gets right to work putting this plan into action. And it's a really calculated, dangerous game he's playing. He starts alternating between these moments of carefully applied violence and strategic acts of generosity to basically manage and manipulate these newcomers. And just look at this timeline. You can see the pattern playing out perfectly. Those first attacks, they weren't meant to destroy the English. They were meant to scare them, to intimidate them, and to push them inland, closer to Wahunsenacawh's center of power. And then, once they were good and scared and stuck in one place, he sends in his people with food to establish a trade relationship that he controlled.
Okay, and what about that famous story, you know the one? John Smith is captured and Pocahontas dramatically saves him from execution. Well, many historians now believe we've been getting that all wrong. It probably wasn't an execution at all, but a really complex political ceremony and adoption ritual designed to kill Smith's English identity and rebirth him as a werewance, a sort of subordinate chief, which would symbolically make the entire Jamestown colony a subject of the Powhatan Empire.
All right, so when you put all of these pieces on the table, what do you get? It doesn't just add a new detail to the Jamestown story. It forces us to basically rewrite the whole book, right from page 1.
The bottom line is this. Jamestown's survival through those early desperate years wasn't some testament to English endurance or superiority. It was the direct result of a calculated, strategic decision made by the paramount chief of Tsenacommacah. The colony was allowed to survive because it served Wahunsenacawh's political and economic goals.
And this really gets at what the historian Daniel Richter is talking about. He argues that we need to stop telling the story from the decks of English ships looking in, and instead view it from what he calls the native ground looking out. And when you do that, you know what happens? The English colonists suddenly become minor characters in a much bigger, much more complex indigenous story.
This completely recasts the entire narrative, doesn't it? It changes America's origin story from a simple tale of European conquest to a far more complex reality, an interaction between two very different empires, a clash of strategies, and a balance of power that, for a crucial period of time, was held not by the colonists, but by the original people of the land.